Hi and welcome back. My name is David Malamed, and for those of you who don't know me, I am a forensic accountant and fraud investigation expert of about 20 years experience. What I want to talk to you today about is interviewing skills and how to conduct an interview. What you learn here in this video, you'll be able to use straight away, so let's go. The first thing that I want to talk about is planning for an interview. Planning for an interview is doing the due diligence, collecting the evidence, and gaining an understanding of what has occurred, as well as gaining an understanding of the people or the person that you are going to interview. Walking into an interview blindly could probably be the worst thing that you could do, because many times you only have one chance to interview that individual. And if they can tell that you are not prepared, they're going to lead you down the wrong trail. The interview will be over and you will not have captured what it is that you needed. So for most people, the best thing to do is to make a plan with all the questions that you want answered. Now, remember, this is not a two-way script, meaning that you cannot just hammer away at your questions that you have on your page, waiting for the person to answer each time. It needs to be a natural flow or a natural chat back and forth. So the first thing that I do when I enter into the room with the individual is I ask them to sit down, I offer them a glass of water, and I let them know that what I'd like to do with their consent is record the interview. That way I don't get anything wrong and nothing can be interpreted incorrectly later on. And most of the time, the individuals will say yes. If they say no, the notes will have to be taken. And at the end of the interview, it is fine to ask the interviewee to review your notes and to make sure that you captured what it is they said. In fact, you can even ask them to initial any page that you've taken notes on. So that will be some support for you that you have captured it accurately. Now begins the opener of the interview. And in the opener of the interview, you really want to set the stage for why the individual is here, what it is that you're looking into, and how it is that you hope that they can help. So you set the foundation. Once you've done that, we've got to begin with base questions or a baseline of answers. The questions could start off with, can you tell me a bit about what you do at the company? What is your job? What are your duties? Who are you responsible for? Can you explain to me the process of accounts receivable? Can you tell me what happens when somebody's invoiced? What happens? Can you tell me about the process of that? And the person, hopefully within the beginning of the interview, won't have to think much about the answers because they're things that they know. And you will be reducing their stress that they walked into at the beginning of the interview. Because if you just think about it for a moment, if you walked into the room, sat down, and had to answer a bunch of questions from a stranger, you would be extremely worried, first of all, about what questions they have, what they already know, and what it is that you would be admitting to or telling them. So I do ask quite a few baseline questions at the beginning. And then I get into the process. And the process really is either open-ended questions of, you told me a bit about this. Can you tell me a bit more? Can you explain to me what you meant when you said this? And then it is a progression of additional questions, many of them being open-ended, because you don't really want to ask yes or no questions because it's not going to take you anywhere. Now, in terms of your ammunition a lot of the time will be evidence that you've already collected. What you're looking for is for the interviewee to confirm your findings. So it's okay to bring in a brief of evidence and open up to a certain page and show the individual, for example, an invoice and say, do you remember this invoice that you signed? The person may say, I don't remember it, but now that I look at it, or can I just have a couple minutes to read it? And that will help refresh their memory in terms of the questions that you want to ask. Going through the interview, there's a few tips. One of the tips in an open-ended question is a pregnant pause. And what that is asking a question and waiting. The person may not answer straight away, or they may be thinking. But what happens is that there is an uncomfortable quietness that quite often the interviewee feels they need to fill in. And what I've seen in an actual interview happen is where we asked an individual, what happened here? Or what is it that we should know? And they told us. And the follow-up question was, what else should we know? Pregnant pause, count to 20 seconds in your head. And believe it or not, the answers kept coming. And then it was, can you tell me what else we should know? And again, pregnant pause, and more responses came out. In fact, there's a particular interview that I remember where the individual started speaking to me about private planes, things that we were not even looking into, that they felt were important for us to know. During the interview, one of the things that you want to do, especially as you come to the end of the interview, is ask the individual if there is anything else that they want to tell you at this time. Because you may not have asked the question that they've been dying to answer. As well, you can ask them the question of, is there anything else that you thought I was going to ask you today that maybe I didn't and I should have? Again, pregnant pause and waiting. At the end of the interview, one of the things that you do want to do is to always leave the door open for yourself. When I say leave the door open for yourself, you want to thank the individual. So thank you very much for taking the time to sit with me and to have this interview. But I just want to make sure that in the event that I have additional questions, would it be okay for me to come back and circle around with you again? And most of the time, the individual will say, yes, no problem. When you're finished the interview, it is a good idea to review before you dismiss the individual the questions that you had planned to ask during the interview. Go through them. There'll be some silence, and you can even explain to the individual, I just want to make sure that I covered everything that I planned on today. And you can recircle back to questions that you may have missed. As well, many of the interviews that I conduct have more than one person in the room, meaning I'm in the room, as well as an individual on my team who's taking notes, that is not just taking notes, is also watching body language, and potentially that person has additional questions for clarification that they want either me to ask directly, so they'd pass me a note during the interview, or questions that they themselves will ask the interviewee once I'm done. What I do see at the end of the interview many times is a person almost sighs with a bit of relief that it's over, and they continue talking. These are important things to remember, especially at the end, because there's a lot of information at times that a person still feels they haven't told you, or they haven't told you yet. I want to give you some quick pointers in terms of things that will give you insight into the individual. Don't be afraid to ask the person how they prepared for the interview. Did they speak to anybody else in the company inside or anybody outside before the interview about the interview? And they may let you know that they did speak to somebody and they knew the types of questions that you were going to ask and they had prepared for them, or that they were told to answer in this manner. At times, one of the things that's needed is concurrent interviews. Concurrent interviews, meaning that you're interviewing different people at the same time. You need a bit of a bigger team, but what that does is it doesn't allow everybody to swap answers, to let the next person know what it is that they're going to expect. Remember that every interview is going to be different. Some interviews, the interviewee is going to be hostile. Some of them, they're going to be silent, and it's up to you to make them feel comfortable. So hopefully you found at least my introduction to interviewing video interesting. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, as well as leave me some likes below. In upcoming videos, I'll talk more about interviewing skills, about how to set up the room, about things that you should definitely never do. But as I said, that will be videos down the road. So until next time, if you have any questions for me or you want to speak to me personally with a direct message, please feel free to do that. I really appreciate your support. I look forward to seeing you again. God bless.